from the election to preparing for the holidays, some of us may be facing some stressful conversations with family and friends, and whether it's hot button topics or just awkward moments, managing emotions can be kind of challenging. So today we're joined by Dr. David Gutterman with Cone Health LeBauer Behavioral Medicine, and we're talking about how to keep conversations healthy and what to do when those conversations get uncomfortable. So let's first and foremost just talk about this. Like, what's your number one recommendation for keeping those conversations healthy and preventing them from turning awkward?
It's very challenging these days, obviously, but the number one recommendation would be to have a plan. You should always go into conversations with some sort of an idea of what you're trying to achieve. And generally, we don't go into conversations to have them go south and turn into arguments. We go in wanting to either make a point, but you should always have a plan. And if it's a group of people, for example, who you should probably be aware of what their triggers are. Usually people we know well, family members, good friends, we know what those triggers are. We want to try to avoid them.
Okay, so kind of have in your mind, I want to talk about their latest vacation, or I want to talk about such and such, so that you don't get caught in talking about something else.
Exactly.
Okay. So if you sense the conversation heading to that direction, you redirect that.
Right. If you find that conversation, and again, these days you can go in wanting to talk about your favorite vacation, but someone else is going to want to talk about the topic of the day. And we all know right now there's a lot of topics, controversial topics to be talking about. But I think that if it starts to head in that bad direction, one of the things to do is you don't have to be subversive in trying to redirect. You can flat out say to your friend, to the group, I'm not really comfortable with this conversation, or this wasn't really something I'm really interested in talking about right now, or I have election fatigue and I'm tired of talking about the election. Let's move on to something else.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just kind of plain and simple, right? But if you do start feeling your own like unhealthy feelings, emotions increasing, what kind of steps can you take to calm yourself down or to de-stress?
Well, we should all always rely on our what we know works for us. I think for many people, doing a self-imposed timeout, meaning that you start to feel your blood pressure boil, your stomach ache, or you feel yourself getting angry or agitated. You can always step away from a situation. Don't ever feel like you have to be trapped into a conversation or even physically in a place where you don't want to be. You can always find an excuse to remove yourself, take a quick walk, go to the restroom, splash cold water on your face, and then try to remind yourself what the objectives are, what it is you were hoping to get out of that conversation or the interaction with the person, and then come back in a much calmer, more relaxed way.
Okay, what kinds of things should you not do? Now that you've told us kind of what we should do, what should we not do that we may be
Okay.
doing?
That's a great question. Well, one of the things you don't want to do, if you know you're becoming more and more agitated, you don't want to use substances to try and reduce that anxiety or that agitation, which is very common. Pour me another glass of wine, whatever, to try to calm down, because that generally is going to lower inhibitions and can have just the opposite effect. I think also one of the things you don't want to do is to try to get your point across. People tend to speak louder in a more aggressive kind of way. Sometimes even being someone unaware of that as you get more passionate about a particular topic. So speaking louder, speaking more into someone's face, very close proximity, that's not going to get your point across any better. In fact, it'll do just the opposite.
All right, let's say that you're talking to someone, right? And suddenly you realize, ooh, you touched a nerve and you didn't mean to, right? So what should you do in that moment?
Well, similar to the redirect, I would say I would be very direct with the person in terms of saying, it seems like, I've upset you, or I've said something that has upset you, and it was not my intent at all. We have to keep in mind, we don't always know people's history, right? Sometimes we do know their triggers, but sometimes we say things that seem pretty neutral, but they've reacted in a very strong or very upset kind of way. And in those times, I think it's important to say, it was not my intent. I'm very sorry. We can talk about something different, or whatever. But again, we don't always know people's history. So we might be thinking we're talking about just a political topic that is somewhat neutral to us, but to this other person, based on their history, they may have something very personal that has happened in their own lives, and we have to respect that.
Let's talk about this. What are some possible signs that a conversation may be becoming unhealthy or emotionally charged that we should be on the lookout for so we don't get kind of sideswiped with it?
Well, I think if you're bringing up topics that you feel like are either relatively neutral, you want to have an intellectual discussion, but you see some if it starts to become personal, that is, people start reacting to you in negative ways, and then start taking personal jabs. Things are starting to go off the rails a little bit, and that's what you want to avoid. So when it starts to get personal, again, you want to redirect back to a more neutral topic, or do something, as we were talking about earlier, to diffuse it by changing topics, and not going down that road of it getting again kind of ugly or personal.
All right, as we get prepared for lots of get-togethers, gatherings, family, friends, that kind of stuff, what can we do beforehand to mentally prepare ourselves? I think a lot of people joke about it like, I need to mentally prepare myself for Thanksgiving, but really, we need to mentally prepare ourselves.
Yeah, yes, you do. And I think it for all kinds of gatherings, again, first and foremost, keep in mind what's the goal of the gathering. It's to catch up with each other. It's to have a good time. You have to keep that, again, first and foremost in your mind. The preparation part often comes into play, especially with regard to family, is what are the good topics and the bad topics, or the easier things to talk about and the not. So you need to review that in your own mind, so that you go. That's what I was saying earlier about being prepared. You go into the situation with a game plan about the kinds of things that are going to help people feel at ease and comfortable. And most importantly, what are the things you share in common, the positive things you share in common, family histories, family experiences, things like that.
Okay. So for those that are concerned that there might be a tension, moment at a family gathering, what are some ways to set that positive tone in advance? And is it something that you can let others in on, that positive tone?
100%. I a strong advocate for being upfront. Talk about your expectations. You think about your own personal expectations for what you want the gathering to be, but then share that with the others at the event. So basically, we're not coming together to talk about what happened on November 5th. We're coming together to talk about where things are going, things we want to do, but be open with the other guests, the other family members ahead of time about your expectations and what your hopes are for the gathering.
Okay, so just want to kind of go back over, if you notice that someone's getting upset or emotional, should you say something like, hey, it's okay, or try and lighten the mood, like that kind of thing? I want to know if that's a good thing to do or something that we shouldn't do.
That's a great question. I think that when you're in a gathering, it becomes obvious that someone's upset. Now, sometimes if it's in a group and you see them sort of quietly, withdrawing or looking upset, you don't want to call attention to that in the group and pointing out and saying, hey, you look like you're really upset. But you might want to take a moment out to go over, and say something quietly to that person, or do they want to excuse themselves or something like that. So you should comment on it, but you can do it very privately. If someone is very openly and outwardly getting upset, you can try to, again, back away from it. It was not my intention. I'm sorry if I, touched a nerve. Let's move on. Let's move on from this and comment.
Okay, we have just about a minute left. What about if the conversation turns into something where you think that person might need to talk to a professional later on about whatever it is that they're upset about?
Well, again, I would say, Tanya, that if someone reacts in a way that is way out of line with whatever the conversation was, in other words, their reaction was so intense to a particular topic, that might be an indication, again, that something more significant has been triggered. And it's the kind of thing that you would want to pull them aside and say, this is what I noticed, and you seem feel very upset, and without being intrusive, to be able to say, is this something that I can help with, or that we can maybe together find someone for you to talk to. I think it's important to acknowledge that when you recognize that someone's responses are so
Heightened.
intense and
Mm-hmm.
insulting.
Okay, all right. Well, we appreciate that, and we hope that we can use these things for the next couple of months or so with all the family gatherings. Thank you much. If you missed any of this, this is going to be in the To Your Wellbeing of our website.